Welcome to the Genius Studios Lab. I am Derek Keels, your host, and today what we're going to be going over is making a simple animated lower third using a program called After Effects. I'm sure if you are looking at this tutorial, you already know what After Effects is. The version I'm using is CS6, but I believe everything that I will teach today applies to After Effects CS6, CS5.5, CS5, and CS4, and possibly CS3. I don't go back that far, so I'm not exactly sure if everything that I do here will work there, but I'm pretty sure everything from CS4 and up works. And so let's go ahead and get started and get our lower third going. So the first thing you're going to want to do is actually come up here to composition and do new. And the composition I have set, the width is 1280 by 720. 1280 by 720. The pixels are square pixels. The frame rate is 30 frames per second, or 29.97 to be exact. And the duration is going to be 10 seconds, and the color is just black. I'm just going to go ahead and say okay, and there you have it. We're going to come up here to layer, new. Let me slow down, solid. And I'm just going to hit make the comp size just to make sure it is actually my comp size, and hit okay. So now we have that going. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to come over here and type in fractal noise, and I want the fractal noise effect. So I went into my effects and presets and just typed in fractal, and I'm just going to click and drag it over, and that brings my fractal noise into place. And so now we have kind of this cloudy black and white look, where we're going to modify it just a little bit here to get our animated lower third. And so the first thing I'm going to do is first of all, we're going to call this, we're going to rename this. I'm going to right click on it, rename, and just call it, let's call it fractal lower. So fractal lower third. I spelled fractal wrong. Perfect. Okay. And so now I'm going to click on it again. I'm going to hit S to bring up scale. And I'm going to click on this little chain, here. What it does, it constrains the proportions, and I don't actually want to constrain the proportions. In other words, if I size it up or size it down, as I move one attribute, the other one moves as well, so that it stays, so the attributes stay exactly the same. But that's not exactly what I want to do on this one. So go ahead and reset it to 100. I'm going to click on it so that it doesn't constrain the proportions, and then along the x-axis I'm going to stretch it out. The first number is your x, the next number is your y. X goes from left to right, or from right to left, and y goes up and down. So this is your x is your horizontal and y is your vertical. I'm going to just change the x so that my horizontal changes, and just kind of bring it up so it's stretched out like so. So now we have it stretched out, no longer looks like clouds. And next thing we're going to do is we're going to keyframe some evolution. So I'm going to go up to here to evolution. I'm going to hit this stopwatch with my current time indicator set at 0, and then I'm going to come all the way over to the very end of the composition and hit 1 for my evolution. And now what happens is it moves as I slide across the timeline. I have a fractal noise that is animated. Okay, great. Well, I don't want to leave it black and white, and so I'm going to change the colors. And so I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to type in tritone, because I'm going to use tritones on this. Click and drag, and now my tritone effect has been added. And as you can see, the attributes of the tritone effect is over here. I'm just going to change the colors. I'm going to leave the highlights white. I'm going to change the midtones to it almost doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to change it into a blue, and I'm going to change my shadows into a dark blue. Perfect. So that's what we wanted. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and click my rectangle masking tool, and just create a rectangle here. So what that does is it masks off this particular piece of the fractal noise piece here. So now essentially what we have is we have something that looks like a lower third, and yet it is animated. A very simple animation. I'm gonna just change a few things here in the color just so it's a bit more to my liking. We're gonna make the shadows a light blue as well. Perfect. So now you have this blue lower third. That's great. And then all you have to do really is add text. So text here. I'm just going to type that in. I know that's really, really creative. And bring it up over top. And let's see, I'm going to add a few attributes to this. Go to layer, layer styles, blending options. I'm just going to throw a drop shadow on it so it stands out from the lower third itself. So basically you would have a lower third that looked like this. And you know, typically a lower third animates in and animates out. And so I'm just going to do a very, very simple animation. So I'm going to come over here and click on fractal third, this layer, and I'm going to hit T to bring up the opacity and make sure my current time indicator is set to 0. And we're going to start it at 0, bring the opacity all the way down to 0, hit the stopwatch and go to 2 seconds basically, and bring it up to I'm gonna say 96. That'll work. Just so you can see, you know, you're gonna have a video that's gonna be behind the lower third, obviously, and so I put it at 96. It's supposed to be 96 because I want the video to show through it a little bit. So anyway, let's see here. We gotta adjust this. Let's try this again. Here we go. 96. I could just type in 96, would be a lot easier. 95 is good. Perfect. So now it starts at 0. It's gonna animate in. You know, it's gonna fade in. I'm gonna leave it at 96 all the way up till 9 seconds, and then I'm gonna hit this add a keyframe so that it stays from 96. The percentage stays from 95 to 95 from here to here, so it doesn't do any moving. And then at the very end, we're going to make it 0. So what that does now is it's going to fade in. I'm just RAM previewing it so you can see how it works. So it fades in, does its thing. You have time for your words and stuff to come up. It's going to stay on, and then when it hits 9 seconds, it's going to fade off. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing with the text. This is my text here, and I'm going to bring just going to drag this text here, just drag it down to about 2 seconds so it doesn't show up or do anything until my lower third comes up. And then I'm going to also animate the opacity on this. So I'm going to hit T, bring up the opacity, and at the very beginning, I'm going to want it set to 0. I'm going to hit my stopwatch at 3 seconds. I'm going to bring it in at 100, hit enter. We're going to leave it at 100 all the way up until 8 seconds. So I'm going to go to 8 seconds and then add a keyframe. And then we're going to go to 9 seconds and we're going to make it 0 again. So now it's keyframed in there. So now you literally have everything fading on. The lower third fades on. The text is going to fade on. It's going to stay on. The text is going to disappear first, and then the lower third is going to disappear. And so anyway, that is it. I hope this helps. It's a very, very simple animated lower third that you can make. And of course, you can adjust the colors and adjust the fonts and do all kinds of stuff. But this is something that's very, very simple to do, and you can add to your videos. Oh, there is one more thing I need to show you before we go. I need to show you how to render this out. So let's say I'm all done, and this is how I want my lower third to work. I'm going to say I'm going to go to composition. I'm going to go to add to render queue. And then I'm going to click on lossless. And then with my lossless, I'm going to either have to do you have to do AVI, but AVI is really, really big, or PNG, a PNG sequence, or the what I like to do most times is QuickTime. The reason why I have to do those is because the channels here, I want to render it out channels RGB plus alpha. What that does is all this black area here will render out the alpha channel. Basically, this will be clear and you'll be able to see your video behind it. If you just came in here and just did, like, MPEG 4, or you did H.264, then the RGB plus alpha is not available to click on it. So basically, when you render it out, you have all this black area here and you won't be able to see the video underneath it, which doesn't make it of any use for a lower third. So I render it out here as QuickTime, go down to RGB and alpha, and then you hit OK, and then you click over here on the output 2 and just decide where you want it to go, name it, and hit render and render it out, and that's it. And when you do it, it will be clear in the back, so you can put your video here and your lower third will show up just like you've animated it. So anyway, that's it. I hope this helps. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Feel free to download the link that is connected to this video where you can download the project file, and it'll make life easier for you. So that's it. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Genius Studios Lab. I will see you on the next tutorial.